So we're joined by Toby Ross right now. He was the goalie for Team Scotland. Toby, thank you for coming to us today across the pond, if you will. We appreciate the time. I'm sure it was a fun weekend.
Yeah, it was really good, and thank you for having me today. It was actually nice to voice my opinions as well on the format and going forward and everything how it went. But yeah, the weekend was really exciting. Nice to be back with the team again after 18 months because of COVID. Really nice to see everyone not obviously playing as well, but also from a bit of a social aspect, but also actually then play against England and Wales as well in a very sort of competitive format going forward. So.
How for you, of course, you have a goalie's perspective, which I think is a really interesting one in all this. I guess from seeing what it was on paper, it might have been what you talked about beforehand and then getting into it. How did that sort of change for you as the weekend went on?
It's a lot faster than I was expecting. I think that was the biggest change to see. And actually, one of the kind of mentalities you need is expect it's either going to be a goal or a save basically every single time. So I know an off-target shot causes a turnover, but ultimately it's expecting one of those two. And as soon as that happens, it's literally the switch back to get the ball down the other end as fast as possible. So it is that transition piece that's really so critical, and that was actually sort of the biggest learning curve with it going forward. So yeah, it's not a case of tens where you have that face-off after every single goal. So it is that quick reaction back, sending the ball back through. So.
Yeah, did you, as sort of the goalie that has to scoop it up and get things back, like what sort of dynamic was that? I mean, is it that feel like a clear? What was the feel there?
Yeah, a lot of it kind of felt like a clear, especially from a save perspective. So actually, one of our tactics going forward, and a lot of the teams were doing, was that as that shot goes, there's already someone running that other way for that easy clear. But then also, as soon as if it then is a goal that you then concede, it's the same thing. But actually, a lot of teams will then try and man mark. So as soon as you scoop the ball up, it's actually becomes that more of a settled clear, but it's a lot more high pressure because you've got a 30-second shot clock to try and beat as well. So yeah, a lot more, I would say a lot more pressure in terms of that decision making going forwards.
In terms of not having any polls out there, how does that sort of determine, obviously, your perspective as well? Maybe see that maybe some of those offensive guys dodging that you might not normally see. Is that sort of how it felt?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, well, Christmas in August, I think, for some of them, really. So you're ultimately guys that don't like dodging against poles, but love short sticks. They see, oh, this is a great day, and just decide to go as much as they want and a lot more often. So actually, ultimately, yes, you tend to see teams would dodge more on your defensive middies from that perspective in tens. In this case, the shot can literally come from anywhere. Someone might just decide I'm going to go for a dodge and just see what happens. So yeah, a lot more dangerous from an offensive point of view.
You could probably tell that I've talked to some offensive guys about this who they start to, their eyes light up because they see the short stick, like you said, every single time, right? But not when they get caught on the other end. I'm sure that also changes things a bit. The offensive guy, did that happen a lot for you when the offensive guy got caught back on D?
Yeah, especially because you want to try and kill that transition as much as possible. Typically, a lot of the time, the six that are then out on O will actually end up a lot of the time back on D. So you've got someone that would probably intends just play attack, and they probably haven't played defense in years. Then you're trying to teach them how to move defensively is quite a struggle. So, and you know that the other team is then going to capitalize on that, especially against England and Wales. A lot of us play at the same club teams. You know what your opposition is going to be like. So.
Right. And thinking about this international perspective, because of course, trying to limit some of the roster size, a lot of that also has to do with not only what, of course, the Olympic Committee and whatnot is looking for in a sport and bringing that in, but also competitive balance and maybe some countries that might not have the depth of others. So, you see that throughout the Olympic sports at times. In terms of your perspective, does that, after just getting 1 weekend, I know it's a limited sample size, but do you see that helping depth-wise, the competitive advantage side of things?
Yes, definitely, because actually, typically, you can get away with it in tens potentially if you haven't got that depth, whereas sixes, you can't really do that. And obviously it makes it more competitive because there is less spaces. But ultimately, the players you then tend to pick are your elite if you're elite within that team, but also you're probably going to pick a different type of style of player. So I think from what I've seen, you probably want to pick more of your two-way midi type of player that is good on the dodging, is good on the transition both ways, because ultimately, yes, picking defensemen and attackmen, they're good at one end, and you're probably going to have to want to sub them off as soon as possible or bring them on when it's an offensive point of view, whereas actually having that more two-way midi as your entire team makes it a lot more effective going end to end, and you can really destroy teams really from a transition perspective.
What do you say did you guys sort of learn that you can take into the next time around you play this format?
Biggest one is you don't have a lot of time to kill that transition, and you see that teams will do a sort of a cherry picking thing as well. There's slightly different tactics. They might leave a guy in your defensive end, and they can just save, wing it, and it's a simple one-on-one with the goalie. I think the biggest thing there was just trying to kill that transition as much as possible, because that's where most of the goals were scored. It wasn't that settled play, because typically teams can then sort of panic, getting used to that 30-second shot clock, would tend to rush a shot. It goes off target, it goes back the other way. The biggest thing was that transition piece of just kill it as soon as possible. If it's as soon as there's a shot, even have your defensive guys just tracking back straight away to get set from a defensive point of view. So
Overall, how'd you say you felt about that? You played 6 games. You said you burnt like 5,000 calories, so you got definitely a taste of it. Overall, your feeling after this weekend of getting sort of jumping into the pool of sixes for the first time?
I actually really enjoyed it. I really love the format. From a it's quick, it's fast paced. It can really get people involved, a lot more engaged in terms of watching. Yes, I'm a goalie, so I love my defensive side of things from a long pole perspective. So I think it's disappointing that, but also that goalies can't cross halfway, because I do like to run occasionally as well in tens. So that'd be nice to see potentially change going forward. But I do love the fast-paced format that you have with it, and how quickly it can change from one way to the other. So yes, a team could be up by 3 or 4 goals, but how quickly that can change in a matter of minutes is a lot more dynamic compared to the tens side of the game. So yeah, very, very good. I do really enjoy the format.
Interesting. Toby, we appreciate you taking the time and for seeing all those shots this weekend. I'm sure you were a little bruised, I guess, after that. You had to do some recovery the next day.
Yeah, tiny bit of bruises, but unfortunately the grind doesn't stop. We've got another Scotland session in 3 weeks' time, so prepping for that now going forward. So yeah.
Absolutely. Toby, thanks again for the time. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
Cheers. Thank you very much. Love to be on the show. Thank you.